All right, we're back after a little break. Well, it was actually quite a long break. We're back with another episode of the MMA Lockdown podcast. I think episode 20. What's happening, Donnie? Back in the mix after exams.
Yeah, what's up, Jazz? Yeah, it's been interesting couple of weeks. Um, but yeah, back in the mix and definitely a very, very exciting fight card coming up on Fight Island.
Fight Island, Yaz Island. It's happening. It's pretty crazy. I mean, so much talk about it. It's happening. The first fight is going down on Saturday, UFC 251, and a pretty stacked card they're bringing to Yaz Island.
Yeah, it's a stack card. I mean, we getting to see, I think, one of the most anticipated sort of matchups that hadn't been made. So COVID-19 has done the MMA world a bit of a favor this time around. Obviously not for Gilbert Burns who caught it, but thankfully he's fine. It seems he seemed to only have got a headache. It's like such a weird thing. Some people obviously get really sick. Some people get these symptoms, but no, not those symptoms. Lots of people die, and Gilbert Burns just got a really, really bad headache and seems to be coming
Yeah.
up and just with that. So that's good. And like I say, the other good thing is in steps Jorge Masvidal for like the most exciting title fight probably that the sport could have made right now. They don't like each other. They're both incredible fighters, and one of the best knockout guys in the game right now versus a guy who's never been knocked out. Perfect.
Yeah, it's a great fight. I think this is definitely going to boost the UFC's numbers, and I think that comes down to you've obviously seen all the back and forth with Masvidal trying to get his what he calls his worth, and he's and he was standing his ground with that, and the UFC obviously came to the party, and I think it's definitely going to be a worthwhile expense. I mean, this is a much bigger fight with Masvidal. I mean, he's a superstar compared to Gilbert Burns.
Yeah.
I think Gilbert might pose like more threats as far as wrestling on the ground, wrestling and the ground game to Usman, but I'm way more excited now that it's Masvidal. I mean, I think everyone is. He brings a whole different element. So, as you said, this was a fight in the making, and we're getting it a little bit sooner than we anticipated. And so what are your thoughts on it? I mean, how do you see it going? I mean, we also got to take into account that Masvidal says supposedly that he's, we know it was on short notice, but he has still been training, obviously not a structured, proper training camp, but
Yeah.
as he says, he's been doing it all his life. This is just a kind of another day in the office.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I think he is better than he's ever been. Something did switch in him a year and a half ago or so, when he started just, really wrecking people. Darren Till, then the incredible knockout of Askren, and the Nate Diaz fight. He didn't finish Nate Diaz, or it was a TKO because of the cut, but he was really hurting Diaz, and Diaz is incredibly durable. So,
Yeah.
I think it's very possible that he presents the biggest knockout threat that Usman's ever faced. And having said that, I don't think he wins the fight because Usman's so hard to beat. He hasn't lost since his second pro fight ever in 2013. That was a submission. So here's a guy who's never been knocked out, and his opponent's taking a short notice fight. So for me, it's like Masvidal's got to get him in the first or second. Even if he's been training, he's probably going to get tired in third and beyond. And I think that makes it a very, very tall order. So, if anyone's going to knock out Usman, it probably is Masvidal. But I don't think it happens.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty much on the same page as you. I am rooting for Masvidal. I think it would make an epic story, and I love his story. Where he's come from and how much he's been through, and from sleeping in his car outside the gym, flying private to Yaz Island. It's a pretty epic story, and for him to hold like the BMF belt and the UFC belt and do it on 6 days' notice. I mean, it's aligning. The stars are aligning for him, and it will just be amazing if he can take this opportunity. But yeah, Usman is what you saw him do with Woodley. who's, also a physical specimen. You don't just ragdoll, Woodley. So, he's been training hard. He's been training for, Gilbert Burns. I don't know when he got noticed for Gilbert Burns, but he's been training hard regardless. And man, yeah, at least Masvidal's not going to be trying to take him down. So,
Yeah.
I think that Masvidal's striking is so sharp. It's so crisp. If he
Yeah.
can, he needs to get it done early, because I feel like, I don't know what his cardio has been like over this time, but yeah, it's going to be tough if he goes 5 rounds for him.
Yeah. The other interesting thing about Masvidal is apparently Damian Maia said Masvidal has the best jiu-jitsu of anyone he's ever fought.
Yes, I remember that.
Standing in the works. Like, I don't think Damian Maia would say that lightly. Like, if you're a top jiu-jitsu guy, you don't throw around jiu-jitsu compliments. You might say, like, this guy's tough, he's really good, but like, you're not going to be like he's got really good jiu-jitsu unless you feel that way. He did spend a lot of time like defending against Damian Maia with Maia on his back. And one thinks like maybe there's something there, and maybe if Usman takes him down, Masvidal handles it a bit better than one would think. So yeah, really, it's fascinating. It's exciting, and how crazy to watch a fight this big in an empty stadium. It's going to be
it's unreal. It's surreal. So yeah, definitely that's topping my list of fights that I'm excited for. And then another epic fight. I mean, it's crazy that these fights are all on the same card. Is Volkanovski versus Holloway for the featherweight title.
Yeah.
I mean, that first fight was pretty epic. Volkanovski looked every bit like he belonged in there with Max. I mean, he dominated him. Max seems a little bit sour about the loss, according to Alex, and seems like he did enough to win that fight. But when I watched, I thought it was a pretty convincing win.
Yeah.
For Alex.
Yeah, I also thought so. Look, I think I don't know who's going to win that one. Part of me thinks it's very hard to beat Holloway twice in a row, just looking at his record and what he's done in that division. But everybody slows down and loses a step at different times. I mean, he's been through some wars and maybe he's lost a step. Volkanovski's also not lost twice in a row, I don't think. So that's also, a huge task.
Yeah. I wonder.
I think Holloway might make some adjustments. A lot of people are picking Volkanovski, and that's fine, but I think it's really hard to say.
Yeah, it's a tough fight. I think I wonder if Alex can do what Max did to Jose Aldo, basically beat him back to back. They gave Aldo that rematch because of his legacy and who he is.
Yeah.
And let's see if Alex can do the same with Max. I mean, I think one of Alex's biggest strengths over Max is his physicality. He's an extremely powerful guy, very physical, throws hard punches. So it's going to be a great fight. My feeling, or I'm going to make a call on this one and say I think we're going to see Alex beat Max again.
Okay, cool. Well, just to create some controversy on the pod, Max, I'm very unsure, but I think if I was forced to bet, I would just think he's so good and he's so likely to make good adjustments. So I'm not sure, but I'll pick Max for the sake of going head to head with you.
Fair enough. Okay, let's see how that one pans out. We'll discuss it on the next podcast. And then another fight, again, I'm super excited for. I thought like as I would go down the list of fights, I'd get maybe like, oh, this is cool. But no, every fight is epic. Is Peter Yan and Jose Aldo.
Yeah. I
went back and watched some highlights of Peter Yan, and he is an absolute savage in the cage. I think he's 14-1. He's undefeated in the UFC. And this is one hell of an up-and-comer Aldo is taking on.
Yeah. It would be such a huge win for Aldo if he can roll back a year or two. He was lucky to get through. Who was it? Moraes. No, wait, he lost that.
Yeah, it was Marlon. Yeah, he lost that. It was controversial, the decision. And that's how I think he actually got this fight for the interim belt, because after the fight, Dana was very vocal and said, Jose definitely won that fight. And so that's why they're giving him the shot.
Yeah, even though partly that, and it's partly because Cejudo wanted him, and then he kind of got in through the Cejudo route.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I'm not complaining about him having the shot, but I think it would be very, very hard for him to win. And if he does, it's quite cool. It's like a story of like a real legend. Like
Yeah.
he can still cut it, you know.
Yeah, but I mean, Peter Yan is the new breed, the up and coming, hungry. I mean, it's going to be a tall order for Aldo. As I say, as you say, it's definitely a possibility he can stand with him. And but well, props to Aldo if he can pull that off.
Yeah, yeah,
And then Don, I think the fight maybe you possibly are most excited for, one of your favorite
yeah,
fighters is Rose. She's having her rematch against Jessica Andrade. Give
yeah.
us your thoughts.
Yeah, look, I think I'm more excited about the main event, but this probably it's up there. It's up there, like tied with the Holloway Volkanovski fight for the second most exciting for me, because I think Rose is one of the best sort of pound for pound, gender for gender fighters in the world. You know, like tearing through Jan Jacek twice, and then really dominating the Andrade fight until she just made a mistake and got slammed on her head.
Yeah,
Um, it's very interesting to hear her say that like she didn't think she was doing that well in the Andrade fight. You know, people have been asking her, you were dominating, you were landing, you scored a knockdown, and she was like, yeah, I'm much better than I was then, and Andrade like was not fighting that well. So it's interesting, you know, like her level of confidence now compared to then. And Andrade is a beast, and she could slam her on her head again. You know, there's a lot she could do. But it's exciting for me because having a active and high level Rose Namajunas in the mix is just good for the sport. You know, like if she gets a solid win and sets up a fight with Wei Li, you know, think of the stand-up battle that Wei Li had with Joanna, and then
yeah,
remember that Rose has 2 wins over Joanna. So Rose against Wei Li, you know, both at the top of their game is like as good a fight in female MMA as you could picture right now. So I'm kind of hoping that she wins because I think her potential ceiling is higher than Andrade's. And yeah, stoked to see her fights.
yeah, yeah. No, Rose is. I think I caught some highlights from her first fight with Andrade, and I agree. She was definitely dominating. She looked like the crisper fighter, the more well-rounded fighter. So I pretty much see it going the same way. Obviously, you got to give Andrade some credit, and she can definitely throw some heavy hands, and she's got some good jiu-jitsu. So, going to be an exciting fight. I'm going to pick Rose on that one. I think we'll agree probably.
Yeah, for sure.
And yeah, and there's obviously a great undercard, and there's going to be lots more fights at Yas Island. It's been cool to see some of the embedded behind the scene
Yeah,
fighters kind of landing in Abu Dhabi, going to their rooms and how they're training in their own rooms and the gyms, how they've set them up. I mean, it's you got to give props to the UFC for the logistics of this. I mean, whether you agree with it or not, just the fact that like they can make it happen and all the detail that went into making this happen, from keeping fighters in different in like completely isolated hotels, test them in Vegas, test them in Abu Dhabi, and all that. It's phenomenal.
yeah, man,
A
it's
lot of work.
unbelievable. You know, and I mean they're catching people with the virus, and that's good. You know, shows
That's true.
it. And I think Jorge's lost his coach.
Yeah, Matt Brown.
Having him in his corner because he's also got it. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, a lot of people have it. Florida, you know, Florida was very open, and a lot of people have it in Florida now.
Yeah, I wonder if Dana's welcome back to Florida now.
But but yeah, I mean, they really are doing an amazing job with it. Like, I think it's the absolute best you could hope for. If you have the money to like cordon off 10 square kilometers on an island just for a sport, then this is
Yeah.
the way to do it, man. It's very, very, it looks like they are taking a real amount of care. The fighters get to keep making money, and the fans get to have some live sports. So
Yeah. It'd be awesome to try and see, because of the lack of the sport going on, how much, maybe 2 years, whatever it is, 3 years down the line, to see how much of UFC's effort now, catching fans and eyeballs now, are still going to be fans in 2 or 3 years' time, because that would just, all this effort, there's a financial cost, but maybe down the line, this is going to pay dividends, to growing the fan base and income for them.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, I think that, there's a lot of fans of something like boxing, for example, where it just doesn't make sense that they're not interested in MMA, or that more of them aren't interested in MMA. Uh, Same things for like people who are interested in traditional martial arts. Like if you practice karate and you participate in semi-contact or full contact karate competitions, one would think you would love nothing more than to watch Stephen Thompson. How does your knowledge work in a fight that's as close to a one-on-one street fight as you can do within a sports within a set of rules. um,
100%.
so yeah, I hope that it forces people to look who otherwise weren't looking, and they realize like, oh, this is actually interesting, very
Yeah.
technical, and a great sport.
Yeah, for sure. It's actually funny. I had a couple people um, that I don't really have a chat to, but they're into sports betting, and they were like messaging me about UFC because they're normally betting on like Premiership soccer and everything else going on, and now all there is to bet on is UFC. So they're messaging me like, "Who do you think this and that?" And it was quite funny. I'm like, "Wow, there really is nothing else going on."
So funny. Get the
Yeah.
cut.
What's that?
You need a
Yeah.
cut for
Yeah.
winning.
As long as I make the right calls.
Yeah, bro. But I mean, that's
Yeah, part of the risk profile.
yeah. They must
Exactly. All right.
take
Yeah,
the benefit.
for sure. I like that thinking. So Don, just before we wrap up, we wanted to touch on some of the scandalous side of MMA.
Yeah,
Saw a video emerge of Mike Perry seeming to get into a brawl. I didn't quite catch all of it, but seems like a bit of a pity after his great win.
yeah.
You saw more of it.
Using it a little bit. I mean, the first thing I thought when I saw it was like, I wonder if the guy's got like some brain damage
Mhm.
to him, like, because it seemed like someone who's like not all there, like to flip out like that. And all he was saying was like that some guy like touched him, and
Yeah.
the woman saying to him like he was just
Was
calm you down.
Sorry to jump in, Don, but was the girl that was trying to like calm him down, was that his girlfriend? I couldn't tell because
I couldn't tell either. It looked like it might be her, but when she was in his corner, she had a mask on, and it's like hard to recognize her.
she was like really trying to calm him down and say he didn't really do anything. I mean, it was hard to catch the dialogue, but it seemed like she was trying to de-escalate and he was just escalating.
Yeah, he was escalating, and then he ends up throwing a punch at a pretty old guy who wasn't even the guy he was angry with to start with. He was just a guy like trying to help calm him down. I think knocks him down. It looked like he knocked him down. Um, then he's like throwing the N word around like, I don't know, 10 times or something. But yeah, I just think like you got to look at a guy like that and think, is he like all there? Especially in a time of like concussion, people having concerns over long-term impacts of concussion. And then you've got to also think like, what is the UFC going to do? Like, I would think like watching a professional fighter hit a civilian, and then throw the N-word around is like that guy should be out of the game, at least for a long time, at least until he's like done something to show that he knows how wrong it was. But the problem, like I said to you before, Jazz, is Connor also hit an old dude in a bar, also unprovoked. And they didn't do anything to him because he's too important to them. But now they've got the same principle. And if they ban Mike Perry, okay, maybe they can use his like racial slurs as the reason. But if they were to ban him, he could turn around and say like, well, what about all the stuff Connor's done? He also walks around hitting civilian old men. So now that's a pickle for them. But I think
Sure.
some sort of some repercussion for him as like a role model.
For sure. Well, I don't think Perry's you're definitely your role model, but I know what you mean. But what I remember from all the press conferences when it happened with Connor, not only with his fight in the club, but also or in the bar or pub or whatever it was, but also when they had that whole incident in New York. Dana kind of kept on referring to, well, it's kind of the criminal justice system. If it's not really up to us. Like so I feel like he's going to come out and say something in the sense, well, he hit a guy. If this guy lays charges, Perry needs to deal with the law and legal system, and that will take its role. But yeah, so that's what I'm thinking, like Dana's angle will be, like we don't get involved in this type of thing, but obviously the language he used, and that is also something that the UFC need to consideration. I do know, I think I follow Perry on social media, and that seems to be like very much, that word seems to be very much in his vocabulary also, which I think a few fighters had an issue with at some point too.
Yeah.
But yeah, just overall, it's a bad look. I think whenever you're a UFC fighter or a professional fighter or well-trained fighter, you should always look to de-escalate and not escalate. And I think Perry's also kind of like a very worked up, aggressive guy. You see it come out in the cage. And I think if you piss him off enough, I don't think he cares who's standing in front of him,
Yeah, and I mean, look, I think Dana might take that approach, especially to avoid people flagging the fact that there's like one rule for Connor and another rule for everyone else.
Yeah.
But then again, it happened with BJ Penn, got into like a couple of fights in Hawaii, I guess, outside clubs, and Dana pulled the plug on him. He was like,
Yeah.
I was not fighting.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, it's
I guess it's difficult, when, like, for example, if something happens, say, in the NFL or the Premier League, generally the league deals with that. But Dana is essentially, he is the league. That's why a lot of the reasons he was able to pull this off is because he makes the decision, doesn't have to go through a whole committee.
Yeah.
So I think, basically up to however they want to deal with it. But whatever, I think it's a lose-lose for Perry either way. I mean, it doesn't gain him any fans, and he just come off a great win, so why go and spoil it like that?
Yeah, and also just like the last thing for me is it's just so shit. As we're talking about more eyeballs on the sport, to have something like this happen. Because I know, like in my day-to-day life, like I've got a lot of friends who don't really follow the sport, but it's getting bigger, it's getting more mainstream, and they'll see something like this and they'll be like, these people are scumbags. Like these fighters are crazy. Like they're bad people. They're hooligans. They're like, this is like like this is like barbaric. Like, so I want to build the narrative of like, this is not barbaric. Most of these people are really cool, not actually aggressive outside the octagon. It's very technical. And you point to like your Dustin Poiriers and your Stephen Thompsons. And then a guy like this does something like this, and this is what people see, and it's just.
Sure. Well, that's very much the narrative Dana was trying to build, and also the image that Dana was fighting and the UFC was fighting. At the beginning, everyone was, it was a bit barbaric, and he had to kind of, build it in slowly. I mean, he always famously says in interviews when he talks about building the UFC, he was like, porn was allowed on pay-per-view, but the UFC, or not on pay-per-view, on TV, but the UFC wasn't, But yeah, it is a shit thing for the newer fans to see. It definitely pushes them away and creates a bad image. But hopefully there's enough good guys out there to outweigh the bad guys, or I'm not saying that Perry's a bad guy, but putting out the bad vibes.
Yeah, for sure.
Perry's the kind of guy you just want to watch in the octagon, pure savage in the octagon. You don't want to follow him as a role model outside the cage.
Yeah, I think that's true.
For sure. All right, Don, that was a great pod. Good catching up. Let's not wait so long for the next one. I think we definitely need to review these fights as an epic card, and I am stoked.
Yeah, very stoked. I'm sure we'll chat like Sunday after the fights and see how our predictions turned out. I guess we only differ on the Holloway-Volkanovski fight, so that's the one that this thing's going to turn on for us.
Yeah, let's do it. And what do you have? Do you want to make a quick call on Peter Yan and Aldo?
I'd say Yan. I think Yan.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, I'm with you on that one then. All right. So we're only disagreeing on the first one.
Yeah.
All right, Don. Enjoy the fights. We'll touch base over the weekend, and we'll be back with another pod. Thanks to everyone who's listening.
Sweet jazz. Cheers.
Cheers.